Tonight, we begin at the outer gate of a medieval monastery after Compline, when the final shared prayer has already faded and the stone has accepted the colder patience of night. The door is shut, but not in fear. It is shut in order. A lantern burns in a niche beside the arch, and because it is the only warm light in view, every mark in the wall seems to belong to it. Monastic night is not empty. It is structured quiet. The busiest tasks are finished, yet the place does not fall lifelessly into darkness. It simply lowers itself into a slower obedience. If you stood here long enough, you would notice small continuities rather than events. A draft moving a little colder through the ironwork, a wick bending and recovering, the faint scent of straw and rain-soaked earth mixing with old timber. Nothing presses forward. Everything remains, and by remaining, teaches the mind how to rest inside repeated forms. The monastery beyond the gate is not a spectacle of towers and authority. At night, it becomes something more intimate, a house of stone arranged around habits. That is why we begin here. The outer threshold prepares the listener to enter a place where significance arrives in quiet layers, where each doorway and wall receives the hour without resistance, and where the night belongs less to drama than to patient custody. From the gate, the cloister walk receives us with its measured repetition of arch after arch, shadow after shadow, and one modest lamp after another. By day, such a place can feel instructional, as if each column means to direct the body toward purpose. By night, the same geometry becomes gentler. The floor holds a faint sheen of dampness. The inner court gives back a little moonlight. The walls keep what warmth the day left behind, but only just. It is enough to make the air feel held, rather than bare. What quiets the mind here is not emptiness, but recurrence. A bench, a basin, a worn turn in the paving, a recess for a lamp, a patch of herb scent lifting from the court. None of these things ask to be admired. They simply appear again and again in different intervals. The cloister teaches the body that repetition can be a comfort. One arch resembles the next without becoming meaningless. One pool of darkness yields to another lamp without surprise. This predictability is part of the hour's kindness. Even footsteps would sound different here now. They would not belong to haste. They would belong to root. One monk crossing to finish a final task, another pausing to listen to the weather, a third returning from the kitchen with no reason to speak above a murmur. The night uses the architecture as a form of breathing, and the listener is invited to follow that slower rhythm, one span of stone at a time. In the herb garden court, the monastery changes register again. The stone remains, but it is no longer the only language. Damp soil, trimmed rosemary, sage leaves, lavender stems, and a shallow well curb hold on to the memory of the day in softer ways. A single practical light near a doorway does not illuminate the whole enclosure. It merely protects a small section of wall and path, leaving the rest to cool moonlit shadow. Because of that restraint, each leaf edge and each dark patch of earth feels more believable, more quiet, and more complete. Gardens at night are not decorative in the same way they are by day. Their usefulness comes forward instead. These herbs will season broth, ease a cough, steady digestion, cleanse a cut, or scent a room that would otherwise feel stale after rain. Knowledge lives here in rooted form, yet the night does not force us to catalog it. It lets usefulness become atmosphere. A watering jar beside a low wall, a basket left dry under an overhang, a faint dampness along the stones near the well, all speak of ongoing care without raising their voices. This is one of the reasons a monastery at night can feel restorative even to someone outside its discipline. The place is organized around maintenance. Soil is tended. Water is drawn. Lamps are trimmed. Cloth is folded. Ink is covered. Nothing in the garden insists on wonder, and yet wonder arrives quietly through order itself. The listener does not need spectacle to remain inside the scene. The scent of herbs and the cool interval between one small lamp and the next are enough. The scriptorium before sleep is not a room of debate or performance now. It is a room of lowered lamps, covered ink, resting vellum, and the last careful acts that protect thought until morning. A desk still holds a sheet not fully put away. A reed pen has been cleaned and laid aside. Wax has cooled along the edge of a holder. Shelves withdraw into shadow, except where one narrow pool of light catches the lip of a roll, the corner of a board, or the grain of a table worn smooth by many hands. Nothing is theatrical, and that is exactly what makes the room convincing. We often imagine scholarship through noise, motion, or revelation, but much of learned life depended on custody. Someone had to close the room well. Someone had to keep damp away from the pages. Someone had to see that what mattered could resume the next day without confusion. The night version of knowledge is therefore practical. It is not less important for being small. In fact, its quietness may be what preserved it. A lowered lamp, a covered bottle, a folded cloth, a stool left near its table. These modest decisions create continuity across centuries better than any dramatic gesture could. The listener is not asked to admire the scriptorium as a monument. It is enough to enter it as a human room that still carries warmth in a few boards and coolness in the stone below them. Here, as elsewhere in the monastery, rest does not mean abandonment. It means careful pause. Thought itself seems to have accepted the hour. It waits without anxiety, and in doing so teaches the room around it to become still. The refectory after the meal continues the monastery night through refectory hall with trestle tables, maintaining a calm, low-energy sleep history tone. The scene should unfold through small acts, restrained light, and practical continuity rather than drama or conflict. The essential mood is settled, communal, spare. The visual and audio language should remain slow, soft, and grounded in material detail. Wooden bowls, breadboard, stool, linen cloth. Nothing should feel urgent. The scene should preserve the listener's rest while still expanding the world. In a small washing corner, the monastery keeps one of its quietest duties alive. A stone basin, a folded cloth, and a little stored water suggest care without display. Nothing here asks to be admired, yet everything has been arranged so the next task may begin gently. The damp surface of the stone holds a little warmth near the lamp and a cooler hush everywhere else. It is a room for small necessities, and for the kind of order that lets fatigue pass without friction. A later corridor carries a different kind of silence than the earlier hall. The lamps are farther apart, the darkness pools more deeply, and each doorway feels slightly more private. What remains visible is enough to reassure the eye without ever forcing it awake. Stone, timber, and old plaster keep their places with patient dignity. At this hour, the corridor does not promise discovery. It promises that the monastery knows how to rest within itself. The scriptorium after labor remembers the hands that have already left it. Tables stand ready, manuscripts rest beneath lowered light, and a few tools remain where they were carefully set aside. The room feels studious even in stillness, because order has not been broken by absence. A soft pocket of bronze light holds the nearest desk, while the rest of the chamber withdraws into blue-black calm. Thought itself seems to have paused here without anxiety, certain that morning will know where to begin again. A storeroom speaks in shelves, sacks, bowls, and the steady grammar of keeping enough on hand. The quiet here is practical rather than ceremonial, shaped by wood grain, rough containers, and the disciplined use of space. There is comfort in such ordinary abundance, because each object implies tomorrow's meal, tomorrow's repair, tomorrow's routine. The shadows do not hide disorder so much as soften what does not need to be displayed. Even utility, under monastery night, becomes a kind of reassurance. At the infirmary threshold, the monastery's tenderness becomes architectural. A narrow bed, a stool, folded linen, and a modest light are enough to suggest care without turning suffering into spectacle. The room remains spare but not cold. Its restraint is what makes it humane. Here the night does not dramatize weakness. It protects recovery through dimness, order, and the permission to remain quiet. The listener is asked to notice not distress, but the calm structures that surround it. Above the enclosed rooms, rooftop air opens the night without breaking its calm. Parapet stone, distant dark, and a trace of colder wind give the monastery a wider breath. There is almost no warmth here, only the memory of it below and the great patient spread of night above. That openness does not feel lonely. It feels clarifying. For a moment the listener is allowed to rest in height, distance, and the slower rhythm of the sky. The inner courtyard gathers moonlight more gently than the outer grounds. Walls enclose the air. A basin or well holds the center, and the night becomes contained rather than exposed. Such spaces calm the eye because nothing in them needs to compete. Stone absorbs the hour, a little moisture softens the surfaces, and the geometry of the court keeps everything composed. It is the kind of stillness that feels maintained rather than abandoned. Near the stable yard, warmth and cold meet without argument. A doorway keeps a little human heat, while the yard itself gives that warmth back to the wider dark. Wood, straw, and packed earth make the world feel older and more inhabited, even when no one is present. The scene does not need movement to feel alive. It already holds the traces of work, shelter, and returning quiet. The night remains low and breathable, with just enough texture to keep the imagination gently awake. By the final lamp, the monastery gathers the last visible warmth into a single, quiet promise. The light is small, practical, and almost finished, yet that is what makes it comforting. It does not fight the dark. It belongs to it, offering only the measure needed for the hour's last tasks and last thoughts. Stone fades outward, shadow deepens softly, and the world settles into a patient close. Nothing more needs to happen. The night has already done enough.